Greetings and felicitations.
Hip hip hurrah, tally-ho.
Hey, Cutie Pie.
Hey, Puddin'.
Let's talk about Roger Moore's classic, The Spy Who Loved Me. It was directed by Louis Gilbert, produced by Albert Broccoli, starring Roger Moore, Barbara Bach, music by Marvin Hamlisch. An Eon production distributed by United Artists, release date London, July 7th, 1977. It ran in 125 minutes. The budget was $13.5 million. The box office, a whopping $185 million. What'd you think about this movie?
This one was pretty good. It was up there for the Bond films.
It's one of my favorites, especially one of my favorite Roger Moore's. We're getting less comedy now. We had 2 Roger Moore movies that were sometimes a little bit too much with the comedy, but now this was truly a spy thriller. I mean, James Bond investigates submarines that are being hijacked carrying nuclear warheads, and so they have to team up with the KGB. So the premise made sense.
So a nice team up there.
The opening credits, again, beautiful. Lots of unique images. I love the theme song by Carly Simon. That was a hit in itself.
They've had a lot of good theme songs for these movies. So, yeah, this was another one. And, of course, getting a star to sing it was cool, too.
And that's one of the taglines that you'll hear about James Bond, that nobody does it better. So this is the theme song tied in with the character itself. I liked it. I liked it a lot.
A very sexy song to go with the movie.
We're introduced to a new Bond villain, one that's going to be iconic, to the point where even they made a doll of him, Jaws.
Yeah, he was a neat villain, and even the actor, you can tell he still looked the same. They just put the teeth in him.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. It was a pretty cool look too, seeing him smile.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, actually being frightened when I'd see the stills of this. This is the first Bond film that was mentioned in Starlog magazine. So early on, when Starlog was trying to develop things outside the realm of science fiction, this is one of the ones that we got some insight on. And Starlog told us about this massive set that was being built for submarines. The millions of gallons of water that were needed. I mean, this looked like an actual naval base, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. They had so much going on there. The underwater scenes. Yeah, it wasn't the first Bond movie with underwater scenes, but it was really the first big one like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved it. I loved the cinematography, the look and feel of it. Of course, James Bond is going around the world. He doesn't stay in one spot. I love the locations in Egypt. And it was said that when they were fighting on Egypt and the scaffolding fell down, one of the lines was, typical Egyptian builders. They got laughs out of all the audiences except for the audiences that watched it in Egypt.
Well, of course.
And by the time that this came out in 1977, you're looking at the James Bond franchise being roughly 15 years old. It was the most lucrative franchise in the entire world. I mean, this just wasn't done during that time period of making a movie after movie after a movie, a series of movies based on a character, and they are consistently box office hits.
Yeah, I can believe it. These movies were so popular, and they still are. And
some producers of products wanted placement in the movie, and it was common for, whether it be a watch company, a liquor company, anything that's considered upscale, to approach the producers to want to work their products into it. But this was a stroke of genius for the public relations manager of Lotus. Instead of begging the producers to put a Lotus in the movie, he simply drove up with the Lotus onto the set of Pinewood Studios and got their attention because they were able to see the car up close and notice that, wow, this is an awesome looking automobile. So he worked it out that they would seek him out instead of he trying to get the product placement. And now that Lotus became the submarine Lotus that we all love. And we got to see it at SpyCon, a replica of it, and it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a beautiful car, and the way they made it work in the movie, I mean, that's one of the reasons this movie is so popular, because of that car.
Yeah, it was when they drove it onto the set of Pinewood Studios, they said a crowd formed around it because it was so unique looking. And it does have that futuristic look, the sharp angles. It has its own look and its distinctive style.
Yeah, it's very recognizable. And even seeing it turn into a submarine was like the best. I mean,
oh, I love that. That's one of the hallmarks of Bond movies are the gadgets. And this is one of my top tier ones.
I mean, even today you don't see much of that. Just the transition and doing something that's that original.
And as of note, this was the last James Bond movie. This was the last movie that Elvis Presley ever saw. He actually rented out a cinema in Whitehaven, Tennessee. He viewed it on Wednesday, August 10th, 1977, and he died 6 days later. All right, now, the opening sequence has something of note that we have to give credit to George Lazenby. His only Bond film that he was in on Her Majesty's Secret Service, we remember he was in the Swiss Alps. He had the idea of Bond parachuting with a Union Jack flag, and the producers dismissed it. We know that George Lazenby clashed on set. He wouldn't just shut his mouth. They wanted an actor. They didn't want someone doing creative things. Well, guess what? What he decided upon, what he created, was used in this film. And I think that was a fantastic opening segment.
The parachute?
Yeah.
That was a very good look. I mean, and yeah, because it was something to see besides just seeing a parachute. I mean, it's actually something that has that symbol on it that everyone recognized.
And they said that it was at this point that British audiences viewed James Bond when they saw that parachute open up and the Union Jack flag ablaze across the screen. He became such an iconic British character. The status of James Bond rose so high from that point forward. And we would see the Union Jack more so. I think like the next movie after this, you see the movie posters that has a Union Jack patch on James Bond's spacesuit. So the elevation of James Bond being so unique, so British, it's of the pantheon of Sherlock Holmes and King Arthur by this point going forward. I think it's ingenious. Just something simple as that. He embraced the consciousness of the British citizens. Something else that was introduced in this movie was that sea scooter. And they said from this point forward that jet skis became more popular. Okay, we have to talk about Barbara Bach. She's one of my favorite femme fatales in all the Bond series.
Yeah, she's beautiful. She was one of the best Bond girls.
And in our Bond Playboy collection, she is featured. And amazing, she was married to Ringo Starr. I remember watching Caveman. My parents brought my brother and I to that movie in the 80s, Caveman. We saw it at a drive-in. And Barbara Bach was starring in the movie with her husband, Ringo Starr. And I remember my brother and I were in the back seat and my mother shaking her head saying, if he was broke, she wouldn't be married to him. Yeah, great part. How she was able to go back and forth of being a teammate with James, but then she wanted to kill him because he killed her lover. I thought her role was amazing.
Let's talk about the Bond villain, Carl Stromberg.
I thought he was a great villain. I mean, he had a lair. He was almost super villainous in qualities. What'd you think about the underwater lair where he lived in?
It was kind of like, Captain Nemo in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yeah, I could see that.
And it was like, remember the Hall of Doom from the Super Friends when they had the Legion of Doom had their own place called the Hall of Doom.
That's right, and that was submerged underwater, and that would pop up. It did reminisce of things of that sort.
Yeah, it kind of looks like it.
Yeah. The actor in real life had web hands, and there are certain scenes that you could see. If you have a larger screen, you could see that. I thought he was, again, another Bond villain that was super rich and had idiosyncrasies about him. This guy was just obsessed with the sea. And I thought the setting of his lair was gorgeous.
They did make everything nice. Inside it was just like a luxury hotel. It was all a nice setup that he had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We did mention Jaws before, Richard Kiel. His teeth, he could only keep in for 30 seconds at a time because of the intense pain involved.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, because these days you could just CGI it.
Yeah, and you remember the scene where he was biting on the metal cords?
Yes.
They were actually licorice.
Okay. Much easier to bite into.
You know, audiences really love Richard Kiel's character swimming away, and apparently they applauded when he survived. And it's interesting to note that it's very much, I think, like in wrestling. There are certain villains that people love, and Jaws is one of them.
Yeah, a lot of times the villain becomes very popular in movies. So you can see that with Jaws just because he was so different. And maybe even the appeal or the charm of the actor.
Yeah, definitely. And we know that would mean that he'd be returning, and I'm glad he did. We did see this movie on the big screen recently with a group of friends, which is very fortunate. We live in an area that puts on retro productions. How are you going to rate this?
I give it a thumbs up.
Yeah, I give this big thumbs up. One of the better James Bond movies overall, and can't wait to see the follow-up, For Your Eyes Only. Oh, wait! That's what the title at the end of the movie said, but Star Wars was a big hit. So we know that it couldn't be For Your Eyes Only. James Bond had to go into space. Let's turn the microphone over to Matt Sherman.
Hello, StarPodTrek fans. This is Matt Sherman of BondFanEvents.com and the James Bond Fan Events YouTube channel. My wife Janine Sherman and I have led Bond fan conventions for over 20 years and many events coming up. And today we're talking about, as is StarPodTrek, The Spy Who Loved Me as a novel and film. Now, as mentioned last time with Man with a Golden Gun, The Spy Who Loved Me is our second film based on a novel that was savaged by Ian Fleming's critics, but it's one of Ian Fleming's finest novels. The reason why a lot of fans disregard it and a lot of critics hated it is the entire novel is written from the first-person perspective of a woman. We're no longer inside Bond's head, aka Ian Fleming's head, men reading about a man and reading an escapist novel, or women reading about travel, adventure, action hero. We are instead reading about a travel, adventure, action hero who is a female. Now, Vivian Michelle is used by men, then uses Bond. A real interesting page turner you'll have to read to get more about. But this is a different Bond. More suave, more heroic than in the films. Now, my friend Frida Toth is a librarian in New York State, so she thinks through books for a living. And she realized years ago, reading The Spy Who Loved Me for the first time, that most of the action takes place near her New York hometown, in upstate New York, where most of the novel is set. So she's been spending the years, even the decades in between, researching book locations. She's a woman after my own heart. I love to research Ian Fleming and continuation novel locations and the films. For example, I was rereading Trigger Mortis, which was the stunning continuation novel that came out just a couple of years ago and really wowed fans. I enjoyed reading it very much. The Anthony Horowitz first novel, he's since gone on to do a second novel for Bond, but there's a great chase scene that takes place on a motorcycle with Bond riding a motorcycle and a gal in the back, and they're roaming through downtown Brooklyn, from Coney Island on up to downtown, and then into lower Manhattan, chasing a train with bombs on it. And so one day, knowing Brooklyn really well, having grown up there, having family there now, I traced the route, marked it out on Google Drive. Next time I'm in Brooklyn, I can go to a novel location. Novel locations are fun to collect. They're more easily collected from the bonds than we can collect Star Wars locations, of course, without being in New Zealand to see live action filming. Or Tolkien, Peter Jackson locations again in New Zealand. I'm looking forward because we have a Bond fan event coming up this September where we're going to Utah, Nevada, and California. And in California, I'll be showing Bond fans Fleming and novel locations, but also Star Wars locations in Death Valley, for example. But other genres, the locations are few and far between. I was delighted as a Star Trek fan to be on the set recreated from different original episodes and Next Generation episodes when Star Trek The Exhibit was at the Kennedy Space Center. I was excited to see the Star Trek experience when it was in Las Vegas at the Hilton, used in the Bond movie Diamonds Are Forever many years ago. But as Bond fans, you can pick up locations. If you can physically get there and get a photo, you're there, you've collected it. You don't need to spend any money on eBay to do so. So I love locations, and Frida has been tracing down these Spy Who Loved Me novel locations. I have my own theories about a few locations as well I've discussed with her. And the thing is that Bond rescues a young woman at a motel who is in danger of being raped, tortured, and murdered. She's already begun to be tortured. So for me, The Spy Who Loved Me has genuine suspense. It's not about being thrown out of an airplane without a parachute, as we'll talk about in the next podcast. It's not about some nuclear device Bond is debugging, but we're talking about, and disabling, we're talking about a woman who has very real, to me, criminals, gangsters, mafiosos. They're going to burn down her motel for the insurance. She's the patsy set up to take the fall, and they're going to rape her and kill her. And the suspense is very real. And the woman's story is very interesting because she's sort of a female James Bond. As a matter of fact, like Fleming and Bond, she speaks French and German. She has journalist skills like Ian Fleming. She rides an unusual vehicle, gets lots of stairs. She's physically attractive and so on. She is a double for Bond. Vivian Michelle. Now, the reason why the Spy Who Loved Me movie is so radically different than the novel is when the critics savaged the novel, missing the point and missing the hidden subtext that Ian Fleming was putting in, another one of his inside jokes, having a female James Bond. The critics savaged the novel, and Fleming was so mortified, and this was late in his life, that he, when he sold the rights to the Bond books to the movie folks, said you can never make The Spy Who Loved Me except a name only. The plot cannot be derivative or matching the novel. You have to be completely brand new. So the film Spy Who Loved Me is a remake of You Only Live Twice. Villain, Spectre, and You Only Live Twice, setting off a little war between America and the Soviets, using a base in Japan and so on. And the movie's a remake, Spy Who Loved Me. The villain seizes nuclear submarines from America and Russia with the added twist, new and unique to this and the coming Bond movie we'll discuss in the next podcast, of starting off Armageddon. The virtual extinction of life on Earth itself, the villain plans to live under the sea and start his idea of a utopia. So this villain's not just interested in money, as in the original You Only Live Twice film, or Thunderball, where Spectre holds the world to ransom, or Goldfinger, where Goldfinger's trying to irradiate the gold in Fort Knox and increase his own gold stocks 10 times. This is a movie where someone has said, people are screwing up the Earth. They don't have long to go anyway. I'm going to give them a little push towards Armageddon and then start my own utopia under the sea. And so Ken Adam, the famous production designer who gave us all the memorable sets of the early Bonds, including the fantastic Volcano multi-million-dollar set You Only Live Twice, gives us a dreadnought that's indeed memorable, an eyrie that is not just a mountaintop but goes under the sea in Carl Stromberg's Atlantis lair. It's a mobile lair, it's a floating lair, and it is at will submerges to become an undersea lair, so that Bond has to dive on it using, of course, an underwater car, his famous Lotus that goes underwater and on the land. Incredible. And it's the incredible designs of Spy Who Loved Me that have set many an architect's and engineer's heart beating. I took one of my tour groups because I really work hard all year long, and I enjoy it. And if you have any locations, I'd love to hear from you as well, StarPodLog listeners. I'd love to compare notes. But I took a group of mine once to the engineering firm that converted the Spy-Lummi Lotus car to work underwater. Famously, there was a stuntman driving it underwater in diving get-up. There were boxes and cartons of Alka-Seltzer making bubbles under the water. Famously, a location was used in the Bahamas. In Casino Royale, we see Daniel Craig having an exciting chase as James Bond on a construction site. And it's just yards away from this construction site where I take my tour groups where they film the Lotus underwater in the Bahamas, in Nassau, Providence Island, New Providence Island. And they also did underwater work for Spy Who Loved Me in Florida. They use the very clear waters at Silver Springs, famous old resort, a famous old theme park, if you will. Anyway, the Bond underwater car was a triumph of movie filmmaking. They used some speeded up film. They actually got the car to go underwater for a few knots. And over a half dozen magnificent and costly Lotuses were used during the shoot. 2 were road cars. So they were driving around Corsica. One had to be modified on its underbelly because the undercarriage of the car was susceptible at high speeds to loose gravel on the road, could have been destroyed. And then quite a few cars, 6 more cars were used for underwater scenes. So for example, one car shell was modified so the periscope came up, and one was modified so the wheels retracted, so it can go completely submariner and have rudders extended and so on. If you want to know more, talk to friends at Ian Fleming Foundation. They curate and preserve the James Bond screen use vehicles. But I took my group to the engineering firm that modified the cars to go underwater. And it was a fascinating visit for sure. They also modified underwater vehicles specially for License to Kill and For Your Eyes Only. And it all ties together with all 3 of those films, and You Only Live Twice, basically any Bond film that uses underwater scenes, filming in or off of Nassau, the Bahamas, for the clear water, and using firms nearby, like these firms in Florida that provided the underwater vehicles, and a firm in Florida that provided the plexiglass for the shark tank and Thunderball. The point being that James Bond is grounded and supported in the real world, not just the world of sci-fi and fantasy, although those elements, sci-fi and fantasy, come into the Bonds very often in the books and the films, but supported by real locations that you can tour today and learn. And the real world stories are often just as exciting as the films and books, if not more so. But I tell you what, we're also starting a new trend for us at StarPodLog. This is the first of 7 Bond movies we'll be talking about that were also movie novelizations. In other words, the film was made and then a book of the film was made to follow. Just as we've enjoyed many, for example, Star Trek novels. Some are new stories and some are original episodes and so on turned into short novels. Well, Christopher Wood, who penned most of the screenplay for Spy Who Loved Me and the subsequent Bond film Moonraker, wrote movie novelizations of these films. So we have an Ian Fleming novel, The Spy Who Loved Me, then a movie with a completely different plot, and then a novelization of the movie. And most of us who are Bond book fans highly regard Christopher Wood's novels. He did wonderful screenplays and is widely regarded as one of the best, if not the best, continuation novelist. In other words, in the movie The Spy Who Loved Me, we have a few minutes of action that opens the film, mostly in Egypt. And the Christopher Wood novel, a third of the novel is Bond roaming around Egypt, especially Cairo. He really captures the Fleming sweep, the Fleming travelogue, the sense that you're in a foreign place. He opines, Christopher Wood does, through Bond's thoughts and words. He opines on food and travel and hotels and cities and culture. You really feel like you're reading Ian Fleming. Christopher Wood did a fabulous job. So you have 2 great novels to read if you want to know more about the film, The Spy Who Loved Me. And if you want to see locations, both from the Christopher Wood novel and the film, guess what? Janine Sherman and I are heading a little tour in Cairo in 2022. February of 2022. It's scheduled now. I'm in touch with our allies in Egypt and overseas, and we know Egypt's open and accepting tourism again as the world begins to open up after the COVID lockdowns. It's a cute story, if I could take just a moment and tell you. So Janine and I co-lead tours of the Holy Land, tours of Israel each year. We go with a pastor and his wife, and we take a group, sometimes 35 people, 40 people or more. We have a deluxe coach bus, modern bus, a driver, an in-country guide, a tour company we work with, some of the best hotels in Israel, and we see sights. not James Bond sites. There's not really James Bond sites in Israel. We see Bible sites, Old Testament, New Testament. We follow the life of Messiah Jesus Christ. We pray together. We eat together. We laugh a lot together. We cry together. In the evenings after the tours wind down, we do fun stuff. We have a joke night one night, open mic night. Another night we talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict. Last year that talk went on for 3 hours. People had much to say, much to learn. Sometimes we even have a private music concert on tour. All kinds of wonderful things. We have a famous artist who is committed right now to doing a private music tour for a group one evening. So we have a fabulous time in Israel. And, there are Bond fans who, I'm so grateful, have gone with Janine and me or with me on tours all over the place. I have friends who've been on 13 or 14 of our tours. And that's different cities every year and cruises and Utah like I talked about in September, a cruise we're doing in October. Anyway, a couple of these real close friends also wanted to visit Israel for the first time. Went on tour with us in 2020. Had a ball. Had a great time. And they said to Janine and me, and it wasn't just once, they said it multiple times, Matt, Janine, we want to go to Israel again. That would be a blast. Spend 10 days with you overseas and enjoy this wonderful Middle Eastern food and culture. But can you do something different? We know that you stop off and break up the trip. This year, can you go to Cairo? We'll join you. And you, of course, being the Bond expert, Matt, on locations, you'll show us the Spy Who Loved Me locations. So we said yes. We opened that up to the regular tour as well, so that even if you're not a huge Bond fan, you can come do Cairo with us. Because the Spy Who Loved Me locations are a real travelogue. If you're enjoying The Spy Who Loved Me, you're going to see the pyramids and the famous light show that they still have now in the evenings. You're going to see an Arab bazaar. You're going to see Ibn Tulun Mosque, a mosque that's a popular tourist site and so on. It's very easy to tour the James Bond locations of Cairo while you're touring Cairo. And of course, as always, we'll do off-the-beaten-path things. I'm working hopefully with some locals in the area too and that kind of thing and taking people to unusual spaces. We have a wonderful hotel in the middle of the Nile River. So people are like, oh, will I be able to see the Nile on the tour? Yes, you'll look out your hotel room window. We all have panoramic rooms overlooking the Nile. We'll see the boats go by just like in The Spy Who Loved Me. So long story longer, my friends, we have about 13 people who are going to Israel anyway and taking a few days beforehand to do Cairo with us, enjoying the James Bond sites in Greater Cairo. So if you'd like to go, you can reach out to me through StarPodLog and we'll put you in touch. So it's a new thing for me. I've done Bond tours in Asia, in Europe, in North America. I've even been to South America to see locations with a friend. This will be our first Bond tour in Africa. I'm very excited. One more thing until we move on. Why does Jaws, as played memorably by Richard Kiel, very menacing figure, why does Jaws eat the shark to close The Spy Who Loved Me instead of the other way around? It's a question, right? Why does Jaws come back as a villain? I'm going to explain that in our next cast. So enjoy all that StarPodLog has for you. More on that to come on Jaws. And I look forward to sharing with you again, God willing, when we talk about Moonraker. Thank you all for listening, and please visit us at bondfanevents.com. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our Facebook group. Live long, and may the Force be with you. Nanu Nanu.